Fallout Equestria, Child of the Stars, Chapter 5. First Lesson. Now back to work. I lost a lot of time and I cannot have any more interruptions. What now?
So, how far?
I asked, glancing up at Star at the larger Earth pony walking beside me. Half a day across the desert, then we have to start searching for this Destiny facility, which, no offense, has become more complicated, he grumbled quietly, glancing at our companion following behind me. My ears felt flat while my head ducked in shame upon hearing his disapproving tone. Cherry clung close to my tail. She was still the same anxious wreck, and that anxiety was swiftly mutating into depression. She was starting to realize that she was holding us back from moving in the manner that we usually would. Nevertheless, it seemed under all the cold dread of her recent trauma, that brave pony had taken action against the slavers that was still kicking. My expenses at the gun store had allowed me to glimpse that side of her. She had been close to a filly in a candy shop, a filly with the financial support to purchase almost anything that the store had to offer. Even so, after only a few moments of looking over the state of the stock, I was surprised that the revolver she'd purchased even worked as well as it did. Although I'd failed to mention that to her. Instead, most of my attention was spent on accepting her gratitude and assuring that she would have whatever she wanted. Okay, so maybe not everything. I was convinced that she would have cleared out the place had I not limited her to a set of armor and 2 firearms. It hadn't really taken her long to set her eyes on some barding, an old modified set of stable utility barding bearing the number 5. The last digit, if there even had been one, had long since been scorched off. I had a nagging feeling that it had come from stable 54, yet another revered shithole to the southeast. Regardless of its cursed origin, it was protection. I'd survived with less before, and by the sounds of the radio transmissions issued recently by other ponies, bad ponies were taking over the desert with nothing any better. Add to her arsenal a worn old assault rifle and a combat shotgun that was in no better condition, and I felt the need to give her something that was at least reliable. I told Zap Zap that it would see some use, and some use it would see, even if it wasn't in my hooves. I just really hope that we didn't get into a situation when she had to use it.
Maybe you shouldn't have dragged her back out in the wasteland then?
My mind snickered sourly. I just knocked the rye through the floor with a mental buck to the face.
We've had this discussion, Brain. I demand that you cease any further thoughts regarding this matter.
Even so, Cherry was no serious wasteland-hardened pony. She was, however, a beneficial addition to our team. Her excellent aptitude with bartering and locks were both traits I convinced myself that I would be incredibly useful for ponies and our occupation.
Yeah, if she's not dead. Shut up, Brain.
After seeing to it that she was properly kitted out, and saying bye to yet more of my caps, we swiftly departed. Firstly, because I didn't want to have to keep Star waiting. Secondly, I didn't want that bitch at the bar finding out that I was taking her waitress on a far longer run than I'd paid for. A part of me just hoped that she'd think that glimpse of Cherry last night was a dream or something. Nevertheless, she wasn't getting the pink mare back anytime soon.
If I'm getting in the way, I could...
Cherry's tremulous voice trailed off at Star's look of disapproval. The sound of her murmuring summoned me back from my slightly shameful mental argument with my mental reasoning. I just hoped that she hadn't heard what we just said, and by his quiet tone, I assumed Star hadn't intended her to hear this issue either. My experienced partners Star and Cherry, a greenhorn, to this line of work, were still very wary of each other. I guess she was just simply unnerved by some pony she didn't really know. A far larger and far more solidly built stallion at that. I told her that she had to follow my orders without question. The mere act of demanding her trust and obedience stung at first, but I knew that the wasteland would be far less forgiving. Asking her to trust Star, however, was slightly more troublesome. In spite of his years of experience surviving and prospering in this line of work, I simply just hoped that she'd only have to take orders from me, which meant I'd have to stick with her whenever we went. As a result, I could see just why this had become so far more complicated for my larger companion. She wasn't the liability. I was. I was the one who insisted on bringing a complete greenhorn out into the wasteland on a mission which was difficult for even experienced mercenaries such as Star and myself to accomplish. We weren't taking her out on beginner-grade missions to build up her skill and experience. As we might have otherwise have done, we were not already deep into wasteland territory and currently in the middle of the mission we had accepted. I glanced back at the pink mare as her gaze lingered cautiously upon the huge buck donning a saddle-mounted minigun, flamethrower, and his fearsome-looking and flesh-rendering spiked armor. She may as well have been looking at some raider's tank.
And you thought it was a good idea to convince a traumatized pony that something that looked like that was a friend?
My brain admonished in dry amusement. I shook the snide mental comment off, replacing the thought with a quick response to Cherry's stuttered words.
No, I want you to stick close to me.
I was almost on the brink of reciting the whole, don't run into gunfire, don't step in front of a loaded weapon, don't go skipping into a raider den, and the likes routine, which more of that admonishing guilt watched over me.
Damn it! Dragonfire, she isn't a foal!
Add to that, the fact that I knew she agreed with almost anything I told her because of her fear that I'd abandon her if she did not, and the remorse only grew like an already heavy millstone around my neck being replaced with an even larger and even heavier millstone.
Why am I doing this? Of all the ponies in the wasteland, of all the ponies you could have saved, why this one? Why go so far to help her?
Those frustrating questions kept repeating over and over in my mind. I merely sighed, the argument that she was a pony who, among all others, was just trying to help finally force me to admit that there was a deeper emotional attachment forced upon me by the traumatic events of our first meeting. It certainly had resurrected a part of me which had long lain dormant. I still hated myself for what I'd seen up in that office. Not the raider mare or the foal, but myself. I'd seen the whole wasteland, the whole fucked up reality ponykind squatted about in, and it was that which had broken me. I realized that my ensuing time spent with her had established and strengthened a bond I had with very few ponies. Despite recognizing the moment in which I had formed a bond with Cherry, I was still no closer to an answer as to why I had formed my bond with her when I hadn't even permitted myself to have such vulnerabilities presented by having bonds with non-battle hardened companions. I let out a long breath, my eyes still upon Cherry. I could see that under the frail vial of caution, she was contemplating what I'd just told her, considering whether she was really with the right ponies. I swallowed, finding the words formulating in my head hard to stomach, and yet I bore no desire to get them out.
You know... Okay, you don't have to stay with us. I mean, you could by all means, but...
I stammered, the fear of her leaving me clogging my throat. She glanced about, looking anywhere but at Star or myself.
I probably wouldn't be able to find my way back,
she admitted tentatively, her eyes finally looking upon mine. Once again, I just simply found her cute. A fact that was swiftly turning my head upside down, especially after the way I felt about her outside the gun store.
Wow, I didn't know wannabe heroes turned you on, Dragonfire.
My mind snickered, using a mockery of Star's voice. I mentally constructed a stable, to which I shoved psychological fucker inside before proceeding to securely lock the damn bunker, before flooding the stable with something nasty, such as plasma or cyanide, then instantly blurted something to distract myself from the idea.
Alack and alas, that our strings of fate should twine together and so journey with yon mute mare. Oh, woe is us!
I behaved dramatically, turning to face Cherry and lasciviously wriggling my eyebrows at her. Despite everything, she smiled slightly at that, her expression only confusing my usual set impulses even more. I fought to redirect my eyes away, but instead, the rebellious orbs dragged my gaze over to her shoulders, past her middle, and back towards her.
Oh, look, her Pinduff is all better. He's walking fine now, the potions had done their work, and we had more if necessary. Come on, Dragonfire, let's not kid yourself. You want to do more than just look at her shapely hind leg, don't you?
I swiftly changed the subject again, dragging the lustful idea back into a corner for harsh words later.
I need more distraction. Yes, distractions, we're good.
With that, I yanked my gaze away from the thankfully oblivious mare and to the middle of nowhere. Well, so much for distractions, I guess. Not even raiders operated this deep into the desert. Nothing but the sand blowing in a scorching wind. The horizon was broken only by dunes trailing streams of sand from their peaks, and the towering red mesa far to the northeast. Straggedly mutated cacti broke up the emptiness as did parched desert rocks, and the odd pile-up of rusted scrap. I never really understood how this place even got so hot, or even why it was a desert. It rained buckets here most of the time, not to mention none of it seen the sun in centuries. Underhoof, the cracked remains of road were just visible beneath the invading sands, the long lines of scorched asphalt stretching off into the distant dunes. Beyond were ragged brown outlines of hills, distinguishable from their flat-topped cousins, to the west by their jagged peaks and lack of blood-red stone. In the miles beyond them was the city of New Pegasus, the length we, fortunately, didn't have to traverse. As for our mysterious destination, I really hoped that we'd be able to find it quickly. A part of me even imagined giant signs telling us exactly where to go, or even one of those monstrous smiling MOM billboards. Those I knew were frail hopes. Like Star had said, this was going to be far harder with half of my focus divided thanks to the addition of Cherry to our team.
So, you have any leads on this place while you were in town?
I asked Star, seeing yet more distractions. He looked down at me knowing full well the question was not one I'd be asking under normal circumstances. If it was normal then, I'd be either boasting, joking, or purring some sexual fantasy. No, he knew I was avoiding the true meaning of complications. Look, I'm not blaming you for anything, he told me firmly. All I'm worried about is that you're becoming attached, more so than usual, and certainly not in the same way as usual. Usually, you'd never bring a complete neophyte on an advanced grade mission such as this. I also know that you would never usually allow your attention to be divided as it is right now, he added, never one to mince words. I glanced away from him, seeing the concern in his tone and praying Cherry couldn't even hear it. Dragonfire, I know you. I also know what would happen if something did happen, and she isn't ready for this kind of life. Instead of dragging her into the dangerous wasteland, you could have arranged for her to travel with a trading caravan that was, heading back to Churn and having her find work there while we took care of our mission, he continued warningly. If such a thing had been said by any other pony, I'd have bucked them into next Tuesday, but Star was right. He was right most of the time, in fact, he was nearly always right. And to think, I claimed that I was the smart one. I knew what he was worried about. He wasn't really worried about his sake, but he was worried about mine. Yet, I couldn't leave Cherry with that sly bitch back in town, only to live through the same experience over and over, especially with the mental baggage of a recent encounter with the Raiders. The image of that manipulative red associated stallion flashed in my mind, and I had to rein in my murderous thoughts. Nor would I let her travel back to Churn alone. Yet, once I was back there with her, I could get her a place and let her share mine if needed, as long as she was safe and happy. Life was almost perfect there, so close to perfect that it hurt. For her, I trot the extra mile to make it perfect. Why? Goddesses know that I didn't know why, but I knew many aspects of my twisted brain, and they were telling me that it was the right thing to do. My thoughts were shattered a moment later, however. My ears twitched upward as my head rose, catching a distant sound carried on the dusty wind. A gunshot. Star heard it too, stopping with a metallic clatter and looking up over the wind-blown desert. That's a sniper rifle. I'd say high caliber, he stated, sniffing the dusty arid air. My visor sparked to life, having been dormant over my eyes to prevent needlessly draining my magic unless the situation called for it. Cautiously, my horn flared, drawing one of my plasma rifles and bringing it into the air before me. Another shot carried onto the dry wind a moment later. I slipped back to my new companion, my eyes and targeting matrix scanning the desert horizon in all directions. Cherry, listen closely, I said firmly. By her frightened look, I knew she heard the shot too, even if she was fighting to hide it. Cherry? I asked, almost shouting. She tensed as if my words were a lifeline dragging her back from a torrent of panic. Now listen, you stay right by me and do exactly what I say, okay? I instructed firmly. She flinched but nodded and drew her assault rifle with her lime green hued magic. I almost winced at that, the hope that she'd never have to kill under my instructions rapidly fading as I had always known it would. Another shot stole my attention. The lack of anybody being injured, dying, or bullets impacting in the ground indicated that the shots were not directed at us, at least, not yet. Don't think we got raiders. Slaver caravan, maybe? Star reasoned, examining his surrounding environment cautiously before he took a heavy step forward. Stay behind me. Only use that if you have to, I commanded Cherry, the words tasting bitter on my tongue as I reluctantly motioned towards the assault rifle. A moment later, I turned back into the direction of the sound, my gun hovering over so that I was looking down the sight. You see anything? I called to Star. He gave no response as his eyes strived to see the wind-blown dust storm. Then I saw something, a shimmer in the brown cloud. My matrix marked nothing, the target too distant and too hidden in the dust. I got something to the left, I advised, creeping forward while redirecting the barrel of my rifle. Yeah, I got nothing, Star added wearily. My eyes narrowed as something emerged from the dusty road ahead. The shape was blurred at first, but as we approached, the mangled metal skeleton of an old sky chariot became clear. All that was left was a corroded, rusty frame, eaten away by the harsh extremes of the unforgiving desert. The bubbling decay appeared like a swarm of ravenous insects as time feasted upon the metal. Beyond the wagon, the shimmer flashed again. This time, it was right ahead. Ahead, Star, straight ahead, I warned him, even though both my visor and eyes were still picking up nothing but the visibility-reducing cloud of dust. I got it. I can't make out what it is yet, though, he added, squinting out into the cloud. A moment later, and we reached the broken remains of the sky wagon. It was empty, save a few scorched books and 2 dust-bitten skeletons, one of which had been the Pegasus pulling the thing. Looking over the bones, I wasn't really hit by the woeful thought regarding who this pony had once been. Instead, I was just reminded just how much I hated Pegasi. I doubted any Wastelander who knew the truth about the sky liked them. Exhibit A, the fucking clouds. This one got what he deserved a long time ago, assuming the warp remains were those of a buck. Regardless, his former chariot now provided us with a stopping point as well as cover from both the dust storm and what potentially hostile inhabitants which might be nearby. Wait here, I'll check up ahead, Star ordered grimly, stepping around the wrecked chariot without concern for the brittle bones of the departed, which he crushed under his metal hooves. I nodded in acknowledgement, but he didn't even glance our way.
First rule of combat, keep your head down,
I advised Jerry as Star departed deeper into the dust storm. The experienced mercenary in me almost forced me to push her head down with my hoof, yet I decided against touching her. Experience in danger would instruct her in ways that I could not. Even so, I knew it was not the best way to build back her confidence up, and I'll even admit, being firm with her was hard, as I didn't really know when my firmness was too much, when it was too little, and when it was just right. As she nodded in agreement, the memory of Red's sickening misuse of some pony's trust only made my insides crawl that bit more. The head Star's large armored shape was no more than a ghostly silhouette against the swirling sand. He'd stopped, his gaze panning the horizon. My eyes did the same as another shot rang from the storm, this time far closer. Star didn't even flinch, he wasn't even the target, and as far as I could tell, neither were we. Cherry jumped with a weak eep, startled by the much closer sound. In the moment I had to think faster than ever. The flicker appeared to the right. Hostile targets 1, my visor declared. My eyes widened, and without hesitation, I toppled my startled companion, forcing her to the scoured asphalt. The shot sounded with a loud crack. There was a sharp whistle over the dusty wind and then an equally swift thudding sound as the bullet struck my dragon-scaled armor. The dull pain blossomed from my back, leaving a bruise as the force was disrupted by the scales. A moment later, it was confirmed that this shot hadn't gone unnoticed. There was a low whirring as Star's minigun laced the shooter with a hail of lead. All I did was look down at the tense mare under me. My breath was quick and shallow, my body gasping for whatever air it could after the bullet impact, and my heart was thudding like the rapid tempo on a drum. Warm blood raced through my veins, then I realized how I was positioned on top of Cherry, and a great deal of that blood went to my cheeks. For a long moment, all I could do was confirm to myself that she was still alive. If I had been even a moment slower, she'd be blood-spattered on the dusty road. My mind lingered on that grotesque vision as I harshly berated myself for the danger I was bringing her into. I closed my eyes tightly, trembling as I fought not to hug her.
Raider victims, no touchy-touchy.
Instead, I continued to assure myself that she was still there, that she was still alive, as I cautiously moved off of her. Then I began to realize that Star's concerns were much more real. I had made this far harder for everyone involved, especially for myself. Whoa there, I ain't looking for a gunfight! A distant voice wailed from over the roar of the minigun. Star Strike's rain of bullets halted as my head rose, and I looked up where the shot had rang out from. Instantly, my visor outlined the shape of an Earth Pony buck in the sand. He was swiftly highlighted as non-hostile, yet I assumed that was only after he'd lain his scope rifle on the sand dune beside him.
Green?
My simmering anger set in.
He'd shot me. He nearly killed Cherry, and my visor declared him friendly.
I was beginning to doubt my own expertise. You sure this is a good idea? Another gruff voice called. Then came the distinctive sound of wings overhead. I crouched down low, expecting an ambush as I saw the armored silhouette of a griffin pass over me. Yet she didn't attack. Instead, the shadow disappeared into the storm in the direction of the other voice. My expression was soured further as the other green outline appeared, yet at least she hadn't really been the one to shoot first. Come over to where I can see you, both of you! Star's voice boomed into the visibility-reducing dust storm. I brought up my plasma rifle, our would-be attackers entering within firing range, and marked. If my visor was right, then I shouldn't need the gun. On the other hoof, my super well-designed, supposed-to-be my best-work visor wasn't always right. Apparently. I stepped back, helping my rather shocked companion up onto her hooves.
Are you okay?
I asked, giving her a fleeting glance.
Yeah, that was just, well, scary,
she murmured, brushing herself off. I just gave her a nod, and she gladly took the opportunity for the nonverbal communication with an appreciative expression instead. She opted for retrieving her rifle from the asphalt. Whoa there, I didn't mean to take any shots at y'all, the buck emerging from the sand shroud declared. His accent went strangely well with his sandy yellow coat and brown mane. I noted sourly explaining the seemingly unintentional camouflage against the sand. Behind him was a gray-feathered griffin, and it was sulking warily, her sharp yellow eyes locked onto us. Taking a step forward, I held up my rifle, Cherry mimicking my potentially aggressive stance by raising her own weapons. It was then that I noticed that our attacker's cutie mark was a broken bottle in the process of being shattered by a pebble.
Sure like he did to me,
I growled, holding the plasma rifle up to his head as he stopped. He gulped, and his feathered companion looking like she thought everyone but herself were an idiot. I just prayed to the goddesses that she stayed green. As long as they were green, then they were not monsters and not something I'd shoot. To the new buck's credit, He had left his rifle up onto the dune, and aside from some thin barding in his saddlebags, he was unarmed and unarmored. The same couldn't really be said for the Griffin, yet all of her weapons were at least holstered in one of the ragged black harnesses Griffins call barding. "Sorry about that back there. I guess y'all were more than damn vermin," the buck said in an apologetic tone, the likes of which turned sour at the mention of vermin.
Is that so? You know, you should have waited for me to check it out before you shoot,
the Griffin scolded. He just scowled at her.
Oh, and you would have done any different?
He challenged, and her opinion of his idiocy level seemed to have doubled.
I would have done exactly what my contract states, and my contract includes the stipulation of protecting your dumbass. You're making my job harder by shooting anything that moves. Your damn wild shooting is gonna piss someone off, and they'll decide to fucking end you, even if they have to walk over my damn corpse to do so,
she hissed, pointing a talon at him accusingly. He merely scoffed at the idea, almost seeming insulted, and the Griffin simply sighed.
You know, I swear I'd have to have been wasted beyond belief that day I said I'd help you,
she moaned, her guards seemingly slipping as she did so.
Well, I didn't hire you to shoot up some reasonable-looking folks,
he added nervously. I relaxed a little, evaluating how fair of an excuse it was. 1, it was dusty. 2, we were hiding and mostly obscured. Then the positives stopped.
3, we were ponies, not some damn vermin, whatever that meant.
Regardless, that combined with his seemingly humble surrender was enough to loosen my magical grip on the trigger.
What vermin?
Star asked, his minigun's barrel poised at the buck's facial regions. I could see the sandy pony fight not to squirm. The Griffin regarded the situation carefully, yet didn't seem too eager to intervene, as if this was some sort of lesson for her client. At that, I was beginning to believe them, however. No raider would do this, and no slaver would be brave enough to do what looked to be the right thing. My gun's crackling green barrel waved slightly.
How about a name first?
I asked in a slightly more inviting tone, and not at plasma-enhanced gunpoint. I could see his posture partially relax as I relaxed my aggressive stance. Star's minigun position would decide when he'd be able to relax any further.
Well,
He glanced at the heavy weapon's barrel nervously. I looked to my companion, and with a short turn of his armored bulk, the weapon moved away from the would-be attacker's eyes. Now his relief was more visibly expressed, and I could swear that I saw a slice from across the Griffin's beak. "Name's Buckshot, and this is Gina." He motioned to the Griffin. "Pleased to meet you, and, sorry again for shooting ya," he explained in a nervously friendly tone. Keeping a wary eye trained onto the newly identified Buckshot, I returned my weapon to his holster. Either, as his bodyguard had implied, this buck was really stupid, or he really didn't mean to shoot us, both dangerous things in the wasteland. Nevertheless, he was unarmed, unarmored, and most importantly, he was green.
Vermin?
Star asked again, looking down over the sandy buck, then at the Griffin, as if it were somehow her responsibility. She seemed to know that all too well and frowned sourly.
"Yeah, darn things in my caravan. We're all saddled up over yonder when a group of those scaly little bastards came out and jumped us,"
he responded, his weary tone quickly growing into one of irritation at the thought of the scaly bastards that he described.
"They wouldn't have if you would have just waited for me to check the place out first,"
Gina told him with frustration, but he merely shook off the idea. "I haven't really met any critter that I couldn't handle," he retorted proudly.
"Yeah, until now,"
she retorted with a loud huff, her rebuke thereby earning her another sour glance from her client. I focused on the scaly description. There were only a few creatures that had matched into this part of the wasteland. Goddesses' damn rat tails, or more likely geckos. I had a fair amount of encounters with both. The former was easily avoided. If you stayed clear of their dens, they wouldn't chase you to the next town and back. Given that Buckshot was still here and none of those scaly creatures were pursuing him, I'd assume that it was the latter. Geckos, there were definitely no shortage of them around here. Little fuckers were often called the radroaches of the Mojave. Like their mutated anthropod counterparts, the oversized lizards were easily enough to deal with, provided he didn't encounter the fire-breathing or poisonous variants.
"I'm gonna assume you mean geckos,"
I asked bluntly, confident in my assumption. Buckshot looked at me, his eyes narrowing at the name.
"If y'all meant the little lizard fuckers, then yeah, there was a whole bunch of them crawling about down there,"
he explained, thus confirming my suspicions. Beside him, I could almost see steam rising from Gina's feathers at the reminder. I gave the talon merc a sly smile.
"And you couldn't handle that?"
I taunted. Her eyes narrowed as she flexed one of her sharp black talons.
"Oh, I'll show you just what I can handle,"
she warned. My smile didn't fade at her frustration, however, and I just nodded.
"Oh, I don't doubt that,"
I added slyly. She looked like she was fighting the urge to take one of her revolvers and shoot every last one of us.
"So, where exactly are these geckos?"
I asked Buckshot, glancing ahead for any more indications. He stammered, seeming embarrassed that he'd not told us their whereabouts before repeatedly cursing about the things.
Old wagon stop just down that way. I was holed up there last night when those little fuckers jumped us,
he explained shamefully.
I wish you'd have lasted the whole night. We were in there no more than an hour, you idiot.
Gina corrected, bitterly forcing her companion to scowl once again. Scratching my previous thoughts, now they just seemed embarrassed to have been bested by geckos. I took a dry breath from the sandy concoction that was the desert air. If he was right, those geckos were right in our way, and going round in these conditions, that was not an option. Best case scenario, we'd lose the road in the storm worse than a rad glass storm would blow in from Sheen and cut us into radioactive giblets in seconds. Add to that fact, we needed a place to rest for tonight, and I'd mapped out our next move. I glanced back at Sherry, who was now looking at the sandy buck before me. Wait, no, she was looking past him. Despite still being slightly startled by the gunshots, her eyes had become fixed of the finely maintained, golden-rimmed sniper rifle that had been unleashed. My look turned curious, then concerned. I'd almost lost her only a moment ago to the very gun that she was gawking at. There was a risk of such a thing repeating itself just over the next hill, albeit death by gecko.
Could I keep this up? Was I doing the right thing?
My mind repeatedly asked these questions as if they were percussive beats. But she was still here, ready to fight and brave the wasteland with me, only because I offered her something slightly better than her previous life, only because she was too afraid she'd lose the opportunity if she didn't do what I said.
Abusing a pony's trust is not the right thing to do, you know.
I stomped a hoof, much to the surprise of the ponies in front of me as I mentally screamed.
No, she was not a fool. She was not some helpless slave, and she was not here because I liked her.
She was here because she was a pony who tried to make a difference, and no matter what, I couldn't let her failure rob her of that ambition, nor could I let it smother another potential light in this dark shithole of a world. I failed to notice the faces of the ponies before me while shaking my head.
Yes, Dragon, you could save her. Do your job and get her back to Churn, or you can make her into something to be proud of. Something for her to be proud of.
First of all, I had to stop treating her like a fool. She could fight. She had skills that we could use.
You've already saved her twice,
my mind stated bluntly.
No, I could do it a few more times until she was safely back home if needs be.
Besides, as long as these vermin were normal geckos, then there was a little problem. I could even make a lesson out of it. The scaly fuckers were that stupid after all. I looked up to Star, forcing a smile that he recognized almost instantly.
So, y'all up for killing some vermin?
I asked, slightly mocking Buckshot's accent as I placed my plasma rifle with the saddle blaster. The sandy-coated buck didn't even blink an eye at my weak mockery. He merely just gave a lighthearted chuckle. His companion's humor on the other hoof didn't seem to be so fake as she snickered. Star rolled his eyes, but I knew he wouldn't say no. If anything, killing geckos was entertaining, in addition to also making the desert that little bit safer. And he knew as well as I did that the ruins Buckshot had described would at least provide a stopping point for tonight. Above all, we were presented with some pony who needed help, and despite shooting at us, he clearly wasn't a monster. Above all, I made sure to help ponies who really needed it.